Hello and welcome to Chess Match. Learn chess with the Rochester Chess Center. I'm your instructor, Ken McBride, and today we have a brother and sister playing. This is Hannah Dykins and this is Paul Dykins. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you may shake hands. And Hannah, push the button to start his clock. Okay, so far both players are attacking the middle of the board. White has what's called a center pawn duo, and that allows his bishops to come out. Hannah will probably need to put a pawn in the center eventually. Well, she's still attacking the center of the board. I suggest that. Okay, now Hannah had made a threat before with this knight chasing this pawn. Paul didn't answer that threat. And then Hannah, why didn't you take his pawn? Too bad. Okay, Paul, you're up here. Go ahead, you can move your knight out. Just. So both players are doing well bringing their knights out. Next, they have to figure out how to bring out the bishops. And you see Hannah's got a white square diagonal open and a black square diagonal open. Since Paul had the center pawn duo, he doesn't have problems with his bishops either. Okay, push the button. Okay, now this is something that we've worried about before with a knight. A knight in the center of the board, he looked at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 squares. But when he walks to the edge, he only looks at 1, 2, 3, 4. So that knight could have problems coming back into the game later. And Paul has brought out all his minor pieces right now. Nice job. Push your button, Hannah. Okay, Hannah's now ready to castle. Okay, now that is something that's wasting a little bit of time. Your bishop could have gone there in the first move. Instead, it took you 2 moves. Okay, push the button. Push a button. Yeah, that knight was wasting time out there. But it's better now in the center, or near the center. One of the hardest parts of chess is figuring out a plan once you have all your knights and bishops developed and you've gotten castled. Paul doesn't have a plan down yet, it doesn't look like. Hopefully you're working on one. Push a button. Okay, Hannah's protected twice. Paul's attacking it twice. That looks like a safe square. We both have extra time now, but it's fixed. Good. Push the button. Rooks love to be on nice open files where there's no pawns in their way, especially when there's a queen at the end of the line. Paul wisely gets the queen out of that line. Very nice. Okay, what Paul has done here is called a rook lift. He moved his rook up and over the pawns to treat that B file as if it's an open file. Yes, he saw the hanging piece. Hannah put a piece out here that was not protected, and Paul has gobbled it up. Again, this is a problem a lot of players have. Pieces are all developed, but what do we do next? Okay, Paul says, I'd like to trade pieces. That's what I want to do next. I'm ahead by a bishop. Hannah avoids the trade, but the rook gets captured anyway. That's a pretty nice move. The knight goes into the center of the board and chases a queen. I'm not sure why he moved back, though. That guy was protected pretty well. He probably should have taken the knight. Now, since Hannah's behind in material, she needs to find some way to start an attack. Paul's position looks pretty solid, though, so that might be very difficult. A lot of players, if they don't know what to do, they just start moving pawns. This is true for adults as well as for youths. And that opened up the file for Paul's rook. His rook's now very happy on the A file. And Hannah found the fork. Her pawn chases a rook and a knight. Paul can decide which one to save, but he can't move both pieces at once. Now she tries a pin. Paul gets his queen off the line of the rook to get out of the pin. The material's now getting very close. We would say that white is ahead by the exchange, but black has an extra pawn. So white's ahead the exchange for a pawn. He has an extra rook. White has two rooks. Black only has one rook. But black has 1, 2, 3 knights and bishops, whereas white only has 2. So white's got a rook against a knight. That's the exchange. But if we count pawns, we'll see that black has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pawns, where white only has 5 pawns. Now it's Paul's turn to make a pin. He's telling that knight, don't move, or your queen will have it. So Hannah has a couple problems trying to figure out what to do about this pin, or does she have to worry about it at all? Well, eventually it probably will be difficult to deal with. So she'd like to take care of it now, but she doesn't have much time. Both players now are below 2 minutes and Hannah's below 30 seconds. Okay, Paul decided He didn't care about the pin, he just wanted to get rid of the knight. But that knight couldn't move. Now Hannah owns the A file and Paul owns the center. Push button. Oh, you know what? You just showed him you were out of time. In speed chess, you don't have to tell him that. He's the one who has to tell you that. So when you're playing speed chess, the person who doesn't run out of time has to call it. And if you just tell the other person you ran out of time, it's like saying, oh, I lose. But actually, you're allowed to keep playing and pretend you still have time left. But okay, that was a very well played game. You got behind, you came back. Let's shake hands. And today's tip of the day is that when you have a piece that's in a pin and it can't move, you don't need to immediately trade off. So this rook does not need to trade off for this knight because this knight really can't do anything anyway. If this knight moves, the rook will get the queen. So there's no hurry in getting out of or getting rid of this pin for white. White wants to keep this pin and actually find a way to put more attackers on it. Maybe bring the queen in to help attack the knight. That way the knight has only one protector, but two attackers. So if you have a pin, look for ways to attack it again. You don't have to trade it off right away. That's today's tip of the day. Chess Match is sponsored by the Rochester Chess Center, which has been serving the Rochester chess community for over 24 years.
Welcome back to Chess Match. I'm guest instructor Ryan Horst, and today with me I have Arjun and Matthew to play a game of chess for you guys. So go ahead. This opening is called the Caro-Kann. It's a typical opening for both players this level. Good solid opening, gets a piece developed. And this is one of the main lines. You notice both sides have started developing well, which is always the key to any opening. He exchanges. Again, developing a piece and attacking at the same time. And the queen comes out. Sometimes it's tough to bring the queen out this early in the game because you noticed he spent two moves, one grabbing a pawn, one turning back, which now leaves him behind. White is completely castled. Black has a couple pieces developed, but he does have an extra pawn to show for it. So this is kind of an interesting game so far. Pretty well balanced. The advantage for white is that he's already developed. The advantage for black being that he's up a pawn early. And in games like this, it's typical that white tries to play aggressive, try to take advantage of his development, maybe try to get to the king, force him around, because typically a king in the middle of the board is a bad thing when you have an open center like this. Now black is almost pretty much completed with his development. The only thing he really has left to do is castle at this point. So this is an example of white not playing too passively, but a stopping move, preventing the knight to go to g4. White does have some holes around his king, but black still, he has not castled. He also has a weak pawn in the center. The pawn on e3 for white is a place that he can look to attack, which he just did. Again, that's a pretty aggressive move for black. he goes to defend it for white. And now black has an interesting choice. He can castle either side to look at protecting his king. How are we doing on time? Okay. Pretty even on time. He's up at about 30 seconds. Black chooses to castle, which is a good idea. Keep your king safe. He's got a pawn up. He could have went and stole that pawn and been 2 pawns up, but this is generally a safe play. Keep your king safe. That way you don't have to worry about anything. There wasn't much in the way. He probably could have afforded to take that pawn, but this was definitely a safer bet. Now the king's safe. He's still up a pawn, and he can do what you call grinding down a win, which is just kind of wearing his opponent down. Typically, a pawn or 2 up in the endgame is all you need to finish the game off. That's a pretty smart move. What he basically is trying to do is he knows that the queen is aiming in that pawn on e3. That pawn e3 couldn't move because you have a discovered check possibility. The queen can take the pawn. So he just moved it out of the way. It's a very defensive move. Now again, black is, rooks on open files. That's where they need to be. He's also attacking a piece on that open file, which is, again, 2 moves for the price of 1. The knight to e5 defends that piece. Now what he just did, in case anybody doesn't know, that is, he just announced that he's adjusting the move. Typically, the piece you touch is the piece you have to move, and wherever you initially place it is where you need to place the piece. So if you just want to adjust the piece, especially in the middle of the game, because things can get messy. If you're playing a fast game, pieces can kind of be misplaced. You generally just say adjust to get the piece on the square. So now again, what this is trying to do is advancing the knights. The knights are generally better on your opponent's side of the board. They're short-range pieces, but they can be dangerous when you get on the correct side of the board. Now, Arjun before was up on time, but again, he wisely is taking his time thinking about the moves. What he just did there, in case you didn't see it, well, 2 things, both are very good. One is he got out of the way, so now his bishop can move. A second, probably most importantly, stopped the knight on f2 check, which would have forked the king and the queen. So it's a very good move for him, both getting the queen out of the forking way as well as now allowing his bishop to be able to move. A lot of options here for both sides. And now they're starting to get into the time crunch, which again, it happens as part of the fun, exciting thing about blitz games. He decides to retreat the knight to g5. Basically saving it because he was threatening to take with the bishop and win the exchange. So he had to do something to protect the knight, so either back it off or push the pawn forward. Now pushing that pawn's attacking the knight, and so it looks now that knight has no place to go. It's a trapped knight. But Matthew did a very good job of defending that knight by kind of forcing the exchange of bishops and giving his knight a square to flee to. If he so chooses. There you go. And again, pretty good game. And this is one of those, in a time crunch game like this, when you're playing on time, you still want to be patient with your moves. He has 42 seconds. He has a minute 27. In games like this, you have the choice. You can play extremely fast on Arjun's side to put pressure on Matthew, but then you risk not playing the best moves. Or you can kind of, continue to slow things down, knowing that he has time to catch up and make quality moves. Again, a move that I like. He got the knight developed further. It wasn't really doing much on d3 except getting attacked by the rook, which kind of left his queen to babysit, so now it's a good place. It was also attacking that knight in e4. I didn't want to say anything before to give the game away. So again, a double-sided move. One, advance the knight farther, and two, attack the knight. And now we're getting low on time. He's got 23 seconds and coming up on 50 seconds. This is where the games get exciting. It's also where some of the mistakes can come in, or some good things or bad things. And again, I like what both these guys have been trying to do with their knights, trying to get them to more active squares, to do things, to become more effective. And he had to block because there was the checkmate threat on h2, which is very good to pick up. He chose to sacrifice that piece in order to get the queen fork. And now there's a time crunch here. They're both got 11 seconds, but at this point it's about moving quick and trying to hang on and not get. And I do believe that is checkmate. Very nice game, gentlemen. The tip of the day is to show just kind of the productivity of getting knights on the opponent's side of the board and where the damage that they can do. This is a good example from the game where by moving the knight onto this side of the board, what it opened up is the queen threat here for checkmate. It was very quick. They had very little time to kind of prepare for this game. But he picked up on it and he was able to stop that. And then what came about this was a very, very creative move, a very good move by Matthew here, which was to take this knight. And this is one of the advantages for getting your knight on the opposing side of the board, is because what this invites into is if the queen chooses to take, you get what's called the knight fork. It's one of the most frustrating things in Czech to get forked by a knight because the only piece that can really do anything about it is the knight itself. So quite often, many of queen have gone down to the knight fork, and this was a very good example of that. Thank you. This has been Chess Match. Learn to play chess with the Rochester Chess Center. I am guest instructor Ryan Horst. Stay tuned for some of the benefits of chess as well as some of the chess matches that you can see all around Rochester. See you next time.
Today's benefit is that chess improves memory. A lot of players memorize the first few moves of the game, but memory is also important in that if you've made a mistake, you don't want to repeat that in another game. So when you've made a mistake or somebody does a good move against you, you've learned that and you can use that in another game. And if you don't have that in your memory, you won't be able to use it. So chess certainly helps your memory.
What are your thoughts about the game?
I thought I played a decent opening, but he had a good attack, and I was able to defend really well. And I was able to trade off queens, and his position was more aggressive. But I was up a pawn. So what happened at the end is he was able to get the pawn back, but have his aggression pretty much gone afterwards. So I was able to pull out a draw.
So you think your strategy from the beginning, before the game, worked out in the way you think? Awesome. That end game was intense.
The game went exactly as I planned. I knew what opening he would play, and I had planned out what I would do. I got the exact type of position I wanted, and then right when I went in for the kill, he just started defending really, really well. And I thought, okay, his king's in the middle. I just have to open things up. I played this move a6. It was maybe a little bit too soon. Suddenly he won a pawn, and right when I thought I was going to get him, he had all these weird queen trades, and so it went bad from there, and I was lucky to get a draw. He defended amazingly well.
Awesome.
So here, right at the end of the opening, we're already at a critical moment in the game. Black is pushing forward with these pawns, trying to blow open the white castle and go for a checkmating attack. Meanwhile, white has advanced his pawns on the queen side, and here white played the move h4, trying to stop black from his g5 idea of advancing his pawns. And this was a really important moment because after I played knight to h5, I have a little trick. And it's got to do with this knight on c3. No one is defending that knight, and when you have undefended pieces lined up with bishops, you've got tricks. Black is threatening e4 with a double attack, attacking the undefended knight and attacking the knight on f3. And if this happened, I would have won instantly, winning a knight. This is why Connor played knight to d2, and I ended up playing e4 anyways, unleashing this hidden attack. After the queen defends the knight, I push the pawn again, and I feel like I'm finally breaking through on the king side. Even though this pawn is hanging, if white takes it, it leaves the g3 pawn with no defenders. White and black is going to break through, and this king is going to be very scared indeed. So instead, Connor brought his knight back into the game, and after pawn takes pawn check, the king comes out of his castle, defending g3 and getting ready to evacuate. Now here I was sure that I was winning because I played the move f4, opening even more lines, and his king is wide open. But Connor calmly played pawn takes pawn and just traded off this fantastic knight for his bishop. And after driving my rook back, he played a very calm move. He just evacuated his king back to the middle of the board. This is very unusual because normally kings don't want to be in the center of the board, but in this position, this is actually where you want to be because you have the most pawns here. Kings like to hide behind pawns. They're called pawn shelters. So here quickly, things evened up a little bit. I thought I had a great attack, but my attack kind of evaporated. And the one thing that I did have in this position after white played e4, notice that black has a dark squared bishop and all of white's pawns are on white squares. So I was very happy that I had this great bishop, but I just wasn't able to win with this extra piece. I played c5, trying to get a grip on the dark squares. You'll notice here that this knight on e7 is really lousy. It can't move anywhere because of all these white pawns. And I could go for some sort of weird maneuver, but it would take so long. So I played the move c5, hoping that Connor would take me with the special en passant move, and then I was going to take back and get my knight into the game. But he didn't do that. He just kept evacuating his king into the center, and here is my mistake. What you want to do in general for black here is try to open up lines. You've got the bishops, and so you want to blow open this pawn shelter. So I played the move a6, trying to trade pawns and open the a file for this rook to keep attacking the king. But it turns out this move is a little bit too ambitious, a little bit too soon. Connor just took the pawn and calmly snatches the free pawn on b7. And here I thought I had calculated a win. My plan was bishop takes knight, check, king takes back, and now rook takes a2, cutting the king off from escape. And I wanted to then play queen a5 check and go for mate, but I realized that all he has to do is play rook to b2, and I've given up my dark squared bishop, and I have no attack. So I tried to make things tricky, but it didn't work out. After a long think, I played queen to a5, double attacking the knight and pinning it, but Connor instantly played e5, blocking my bishop, and I realized I was in trouble.
And stop. See you next time. We'll see you next time. Sorry.
I screwed it up. You probably take that again.
Shake hands, good sportsmanship. Awesome.
That's not a tip.
Don't you love the time pressure? And clubs.